Richard Harmon was not the kind of man you felt sorry for. He was 52 years old, worth $11 million, and lived in a house so big his voice echoed when he walked through it alone. He had built his construction company from nothing, started with one truck, one crew, and a dream so stubborn it refused to die. By the time he was 40, he had contracts across 4 states. By 45, he had a private accountant, a personal assistant, and a wife named Sandra who looked like she belonged on a magazine cover. From the outside, Richard's life looked like a reward, like something you pin on a vision board. But from the inside, from where Richard was living, it felt like a slow, quiet prison sentence. It started 3 years ago, a dull ache in his stomach that he brushed off as stress. Then it got worse. Then worse. He started losing weight without trying. He stopped sleeping. He would lie in bed at 2 in the morning staring at the ceiling, his body hurting in ways he could not explain to any doctor, and they tried. He saw 6 different specialists. He did blood tests, scans, everything. Every single doctor came back with the same look on their face, confused. Nothing was showing up that explained how bad Richard felt. He stopped going into the office. He started working from home, then barely working at all. His energy disappeared. He could not eat without feeling sick. He lost 23 pounds in 4 months. His hands shook when he poured his morning coffee. And Sandra, his wife of 14 years, was right there through all of it. She brought him his medication. She sat beside him at doctor appointments. She held his hand in waiting rooms and told him everything was going to be okay. She cried in front of his sister and said how hard it was to watch the man she loved fall apart. People called her a saint. His own mother pulled Sandra aside at Christmas and said, "I don't know what Richard would do without you." What nobody saw, what nobody even suspected, was that Sandra was the reason. Richard was sick. Richard's assistant was a 26-year-old named Danny. Sharp kid, quiet, loyal, the kind of person who notices things but never says anything unless it matters. Danny had worked for Richard for 4 years. He knew the business inside and out. He also knew Sandra, because Sandra called the office sometimes, but less and less over the past 2 years. And when she did call, something felt off to Danny. He couldn't explain it, just a feeling. One afternoon, Danny was dropping off some contracts at the house because Richard was too weak to come in. Sandra answered the door. She looked surprised, not just surprised that Danny was there, but surprised in a different way, like she had been caught mid-thought. She took the folder, said thank you, and shut the door faster than necessary. Danny sat in his car for a minute. He drove away, but he couldn't shake the feeling. 2 weeks later, Danny was reviewing some of the company's shared expense accounts that Sandra had access to because she handled some of Richard's personal finances. And Danny saw something that made him go very still. Transfers. Small ones at first. $500 here, $1,000 there. Easy to miss. But Danny went back further. 6 months. 12 months. 20 months. The transfers added up to just under $400,000. All going to an account Danny didn't recognize. He checked it 3 times. He wasn't wrong. Danny printed everything, put it in a plain envelope, and he drove back to Richard's house. Richard was sitting in his recliner when Danny came in, wrapped in a blanket even though it was 68 degrees in the house. He looked thin, tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. Danny sat across from him and said, "Richard, I need you to look at something, and I need you to stay calm." Richard looked at the papers for a long time. His face didn't change. He just sat there reading, slowly flipping through each page. When he got to the last one, he set it down on his knee and stared at the wall. $400,000. Gone. To an account with a name he didn't know. He asked Danny to leave. He said he needed to think. Danny left, but he called Richard's personal attorney on the way out and told him to be ready. That night, Sandra came home at 9:30. She said she had been at her sister's. She kissed Richard on the forehead. She went to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of wine. And Richard watched her from across the room like he was seeing her for the very first time. He didn't say anything that night. The next morning, while Sandra was at yoga, Richard called his attorney. Then he called a private investigator. Then he called his doctor, not the specialists, but his regular doctor, a man named Dr. Ellison, who had known Richard for 15 years, and told him everything. About the transfers, about the account, about how Sandra was the one managing his supplements and his vitamins, and the little green drink she made him every morning and insisted he drink. Dr. Ellison went quiet on the phone. Then he said, "Richard, I need you to stop taking everything Sandra gives you. Everything. Today. And come see me Monday morning." Richard stopped. Within 2 weeks, he started sleeping better. Within a month, the stomach pain began to ease. Within 6 weeks, he had gained back 8 pounds and his hands had stopped shaking. Dr. Ellison ran a new set of tests with fresh eyes. What he found was a pattern, a buildup of something in Richard's system that should not have been there. Something that, in small doses over a long period of time, would cause exactly what Richard had been experiencing for 3 years. Fatigue, pain, weight loss, confusion, a slow, invisible decline that looked like illness but wasn't. Richard sat in that doctor's office and didn't speak for almost 5 full minutes. 3 years. She had watched him suffer for 3 years. The investigator's report came back 10 days later. Sandra had been seeing someone, a man named Greg, who ran a real estate investment company 2 cities over. They had met at a charity gala 4 years ago. The relationship had been going on for 3.5 years. The $400,000 had gone directly into a joint account that Sandra and Greg shared, an account that had been quietly funding the down payments on 3 investment properties, all in Greg's name. The plan, as best the investigator could piece together, was to let Richard's health decline until, and these are the words that the investigator used very carefully, a natural conclusion. Then, Sandra would inherit everything. The company, the house, the accounts, $11 million. And she would walk away clean, with Greg, and a story about being the devoted wife who stood by her sick husband until the end. She had almost pulled it off. Richard's attorney filed the paperwork quietly and quickly. Divorce, fraud, the financial forensics team combed through 4 years of records. The transfers, the joint account, the properties, all of it documented. Greg was named in a separate civil case. Sandra's attorney tried to negotiate, tried to spin it, tried to paint Sandra as a misunderstood woman in a loveless marriage who made some financial mistakes. The judge was not moved. Sandra walked away with nothing. No house, no accounts, no inheritance. The prenuptial agreement Richard had signed before their wedding, the one Sandra had complained about and called insulting, and spent 2 weeks trying to get him to throw away, protected everything that was his before the marriage. And everything built during the marriage was now frozen pending fraud proceedings. She lost the properties. She lost Greg, who stopped returning her calls the moment his own legal trouble started. She lost the life she had been building in secret for 3.5 years. Richard stood on the back porch of his house the night the divorce was finalized. It was October, cold enough to see his breath. He held a cup of coffee and looked out at the yard he had landscaped himself. Back when he had the energy for that sort of thing. Back when life felt lighter. He thought about 3 years of mornings where he woke up and felt like he was disappearing. 3 years of doctors and tests and specialists who couldn't explain it. 3 years of Sandra handing him a green drink every morning with a smile. And him drinking it because he trusted her. Because she was his wife. Because that's what you do. He thought about his mother telling Sandra she didn't know what Richard would do without her. He almost laughed. But it wasn't funny enough for that. What Richard did next surprised a lot of people. He didn't give interviews. He didn't post about it. He didn't become bitter in public. He went back to work, slowly at first, then steadily. He called his crew chiefs and told them he was coming back. He shook hands, walked job sites, reviewed contracts. He started eating real meals. He started sleeping 8 hours. He started lifting weights again for the first time in 4 years. Just light stuff. Just to feel like his body belonged to him again. His company had survived his absence because he had built it on systems, not on ego. It bounced back fast. Within a year of his return, they landed the biggest contract in the company's history. A commercial development project worth more than everything Sandra had ever tried to take from him. He hired Danny as his operations manager. Gave him a raise that made Danny's eyes go wide. Richard just said, "You earned it." He never remarried. He never talked badly about Sandra publicly. When people asked him about what happened, he said the same thing every time. "I learned who was real and who was performing. Turns out that's worth knowing." His mother called him one night, almost a year after everything came out. She was quiet for a long time on the phone. Then she said, "Richard, I'm so sorry. I told that woman she was a saint. Richard said, "Mom, don't. You loved me, and you saw someone taking care of me, and you were grateful. There's nothing wrong with that. She fooled everyone. That's on her, not you." His mother cried. He let her. Then he said, "I'm okay. I actually feel better than I have in years. My hands don't shake anymore. I can eat breakfast without my stomach hurting. I walked 3 miles this morning, and I didn't even think about it. I'm okay." And he meant it. That's the thing about people like Richard that nobody talks about enough. They don't survive because they're rich. They survive because somewhere, underneath everything, underneath the money, and the company, and the house, there is something stubborn and unbreakable that refuses to go quietly. Richard had built something from nothing once. He knew how to start over. He had done it before, except that time he only had a truck and a dream. This time, he had his health back, his company, his name, and the clarity that only comes from looking someone in the eye and realizing they were never who you thought they were. Sandra had counted on one thing above everything else. She had counted on Richard being too sick